welcome everybody. To talk about managing Rubyists, in case you're meant to be on the other track. Quick introduction, my name is Melia. I'm the VP of Engineering for a company called WePlay. We're sort of a social site for youth sports. Before that, I was the Director of Software Development at Oxygen Media, a cable TV network for women here in town. I was counting up to do this slide. I've been writing software for 15 years now professionally, which is sort of scary. I've been a Rubyist since 2005, Agile practitioner since about 2002. I'm a dad of 2 girls, like to play beach volleyball, and that's my GORUCO badge from a couple of years ago. And I also, one of my sort of proudest moments for my Ruby resume is that I helped organize the first GORUCO, and so I'm particularly honored to be up here before you guys today. So your turn. How many people here are currently managing a Ruby team? Just show of hands. Okay, cool. How many people have a manager? Okay, how many people wish you didn't? Just kidding. There you go. And how many of you think that you probably will be managing a Ruby team in the next 2 years, say? Yeah. So one of the things that I've noticed just talking to people is that particularly with the startup scene in New York, taking off the way it is, more and more of the people that I've worked with in the past are stepping into these management roles. And unfortunately, just because you're a good programmer and a good Rubyist doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good manager. It's like a whole new learning curve to climb. So one of the things that I hope we can do today is talk about how do you do that? You know, how do you climb that curve? But first, before we get into it, I want to just address sort of a natural question, which is why talk about managing Rubyists? How is that any different from managing any sort of software development team? And in truth, there's a huge amount of overlap, but I do think that there is some key differences, and those are all derived from the fact that it's the Rubyists who are different. And so how? I think the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, is that as a community, we tend to be more independent thinkers. The path of least resistance in software development, as you probably know, is pretty much Microsoft. Java is a pretty well-trodden path also. So if you're coming out of college, you probably learned Java and CS if you graduated relatively recently. And the natural thing to do is go get a Java job or go get a Microsoft job, because there's a lot of those. Their standards are low. But one of the things that makes Ruby different is that there's no big company that is the sort of 800-pound gorilla in our world. And so think about it: C#, VB, you've got Microsoft; Java, you've got Sun, now Oracle. And Python's a lot better, but even so, like Guido is employed now by Google. And contrast that with Yukihiro Matsumoto, employed by an open source systems integrator in Japan. Not exactly like a big profit motive weighing on the sort of day-to-day changes in the Ruby community. The other thing that makes this community unique is open source. And open source obviously is permeating the entire software development world. But I think because of the points that we just talked about, which is that there is no sort of parental figure where we're looking to for solutions, this community has taken things into their own hands in a pretty big way. And the thing that's one of the most amazing things to me is the number of people who are contributing to open source actively. How many people in this room, say, have a commit to Rails? Quite a few. How many have a commit to any open source project? Wow, that's awesome. So quick contrast, Struts, fairly well-known Java web framework, according to Olo, has 71 or 79, 71 contributors. Anybody know how many contributors Rails has? Over 1,500. That's pretty awesome. One of the consequences of that is that Rubyists are accustomed and embrace a culture of change. In fact, you might call it a culture of chaos. Some examples: FastCGI, Lighty, Mongrel, Passenger, Unicorn, and that's just the last 3 years. Similarly, who knows what the best delayed job fork to run is? Anybody? There's a lot of them. What's the best authentication plugin? Okay, AuthLogic, I heard a couple. When I was writing a chapter for Ruby in Practice a few years ago, when I wrote it about Access Authenticated, by the time it was about to go to press, RESTful authentication was sort of the best thing to use out there, and that of course would be out of date today. So what we've learned, I think, as a community is that stability in your application is obviously a really good thing. Stability in an entire software ecosystem can mean stagnation. And so this kind of churn, I think, is actually really healthy in how fast we can move. Another thing that's key about this, about us, is that is craftsmanship. And there's a big conversation about craftsmanship in the wider software world, and it basically boils down to this question: is software development a profession or is it a craft? And there's a lot of people that feel quite passionately about both sides. I would venture to guess that in this room, we have a fair consensus that software development is a craft. And this really impacts how you work, how you work as a manager with the craftspeople. Lastly, this might be a little controversial. I don't know if you can read that. It says hedonism. Well, why hedonism? Well, here's what Matz said in an interview in 2003. For me, the purpose of life is partly to have joy. Programmers often feel joy when they can concentrate on the creative side of programming, and so Ruby is designed to make programmers happy. I love this. This is, and I think about why do I love working with Ruby? Why do I love, the work that I do every day? This is a lot of what it is. And so if you're faced with the task of leading a team, managing a team that's full of independent thinkers, community-minded, change-embracing, early adopters, craftsmen and women, and hedonists, do you think that the sort of tried and true management practices are going to work? Do you think that we can grab the human resource management practice textbook, 10th edition, with all apologies to Michael Armstrong, I don't think it's going to work. But something does work, and what I'm going to talk about today is simply what's worked for me over the last 2 teams that I've managed, first at Oxygen and now at WePlay. And the sweet spot here is managing a team of about 4 to 8 developers, and doing it as a hands-on manager, as someone who's still coding day to day, and having a lot of fun, getting a lot of great software written. So first, a quick disclaimer. This is a really big topic. We could spend all day talking about this and really just scratch the surface. And in addition, does anybody know what this acronym means? Any Perl programmers? There's more than one way to do it. Absolutely true for management. These are, again, ideas designed to help you put together sort of your own toolkit as you face this challenge. So here's the goal. The goal is a great team made up of happy people who respect and trust each other, building great software aligned with the business goals of your company, working efficiently and getting better all the time. And I think that we've got, on my current team and my team at Oxygen, we've got a sort of system down that does that pretty well. So I've identified 5 key principles. We're going to talk a little bit about those now, and then there's 15 specific practices that we'll run through, and that's basically going to be the structure of the talk, and then we can continue the conversation, some Q&A, but also through the rest of the day, the party tonight, etc. So first principle, self-organizing team, probably the most important one from my perspective. Core to the concept of a self-organizing team is respect for the talent and intelligence of the people that work for you. So my goal is always to hire people who are smarter than I am. It's not that hard, fortunately. Now, and you might be thinking, well, I'm a little smarter than the people that work for me. So what I would say is, A, I think it's a good goal anyway, but B, are you smarter than the combined brain power of the people that work for you? And I certainly hope not. So the goal is to help your team develop a self-awareness of how it works. What are its own system dynamics? What does it need to be successful? What does it need to, what gets in its way? And then empower it to make the changes to maximize its effectiveness, to get rid of the things that are in its way, and to work in such a way that lets it do its thing, be in the zone, and be shipping great software regularly. And so one of the interesting and a little bit ironic things about the idea of a self-organizing team is that I'm at my best as a manager when I don't have to do anything. It's kind of funny, but when the team basically takes care of itself. Except for a couple of things. A self-organizing team really gets the goals of the team accomplished. But simply being successful on a team is, for most of the Rubyists that I know, is not enough. They have to be growing personally, professionally, in their craft. And so that needs to be part of your responsibility as a manager, is to help that growth occur. Because if that growth isn't occurring, if someone's feeling like they're kind of stagnating, what do you think they're going to do? Yeah, look for something else. And you can't blame them. Most of us have probably been there in our career at some point. So you can either, they can grow via a new job, or you can help them grow on the job and make your team stronger. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. This one is certainly worth a talk by itself. Hire well. Talk a little bit about our hiring tactics and what I think works there. It's the hardest part of the job and also the most important part. I love the contrast in the term servant leadership. We don't really think of servants as leaders, generally speaking, but this goes hand in hand with this idea of self-organizing team, because if you are doing whatever it takes in the service of this group of great developers becoming a great team and doing really well, that's simultaneously service and its leadership. It takes some humbleness to really embrace servant leadership, and also to embrace this idea of a self-organizing team. And this is sometimes at odds with my last principle here, which is inspirational leadership, because it actually takes some ego and some courage to be able to push and invite your team to be greater than it is today. To sort of give a call to arms and say, let's go get this problem. So with that, let's hop into the first of these 15 key practices. Management by observation. This is a simple one. We're going to start with some fundamentals. Sit with your team. I love music. I was stoked to hear the Kaiser Chiefs Ruby, 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 Ruby introducing it. Ross is out there, introduced that to our team, and we play it all the time. But if you're a manager, skip the headphones, because you got to know what's going on. And if you're sitting there and you're not wearing headphones, you're sort of halfway there to knowing what your team is going through and what it needs. The other thing is, just because you're listening, just because you're observing what's going on, think twice about interrupting. If there's a conversation, even an argument, design argument, let it get hashed out. Now, if it's going nowhere, then obviously step in and try to facilitate a little bit. But you don't need to participate in every conversation that's going on just because you're there observing. This one I call management by coding around, and I ripped off the title from an old practice that originated at Hewlett-Packard in the early days of Hewlett-Packard, called management by walking around. And it sounds pretty simplistic, but the concept is that you need to understand what your people are going through day to day. And you also need to recognize that everybody wants to do a good job, and if they've got the tools to do so, then that's what they'll do. You can read a little bit more about it in Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence, if you want, and it's actually a really useful technique for sort of big execs at a large organization. Now, that's not us, but it's pretty interesting to sort of figure out how to scale it down, because in software development, there's a feedback loop that's really hard to observe. So I could be sitting next to Aaron all day and say we both got our headphones on, or even not. I might have no idea what he's working on. No idea that the trouble that he's going through, the obstacles that he's run up against, because that feedback loop is between the developer and the code. So the question is, if you want to manage that effectively, how do you get in there? How do you understand what's going on? So there's a couple of ways that I know how to do that well, and a couple of ways that I know how to do that okay. And the best way to do it well is through pair programming. And by that I mean pairing with every member of your team regularly, writing code together. And you're going to see it. I want to take a quick tangent here, because there's a danger in pair programming where there's sort of a power dynamic there of like boss and team member. You got to check that relationship at the door when you're pairing. Pair programming certainly works best when it's a meeting of equal minds and you're hashing out problems together. In general, as a manager, you can think of two types of power: role power because you're the boss, and relationship power, because of the working relationship that you've developed over time with the people on your team. Basically, you never want to use role power. There's times where you might have to, but if you can avoid it, avoid it. Do things because it makes the most sense for the team, and because you've gone through the trenches together with these folks, they understand that and would make that decision with you. So if you're not pairing with members of your team, the second best is to have the team members pairing with each other. And then because you're sitting with them, because you're listening, you've taken that internal feedback loop and it's externalized it because the conversation is going on in front of you between developers instead of you and the developer in the screen. Lastly, or almost lastly, if that doesn't work, you can review commit logs. Gives you some clues. And finally, you can just ask people. And it's not that great, but it certainly is better than nothing. Number 3 is tools and workspaces. These are pretty obvious mostly, but spend money for equipment. Equipment's a lot cheaper than salaries. And if you can make your people more effective, you need less of them. A quick budgeting tip. Budget for a yearly refresh for your developers. That's usually a different cycle than business people around, which is usually a 2 to 3 year cycle for getting a new laptop. Shared style and editors, encourage it. I think it's pretty useful, but certainly it's not something that you need to insist upon. Hopefully the team realizes that if you're using the same tools, they can help each other grow faster, share shortcuts, share new plugins, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody like cubicles here? Okay, I didn't want to offend anybody. I hate cubicles. The things I think I hate about modern business the most are cubicles and calling people resources. It drives me nuts. So at WePlay, we're housed inside of our sister organization, Major League Baseball.com, that has its own sort of culture and a lot of cubicles. And so in order to get cubicles stored down the first time, I had to literally bring my toolbox in and threaten to dismantle them before they were gone. Second time was absolutely brutal. It took about 9 months and several $1,000s, but we eventually got rid of them. And basically what I'd say is, if you're in a situation where this is a factor, do not give up, stop at nothing to get rid of them. A policy for policies. When something goes wrong, especially, there's a lot of pressure to put a rule in place so it doesn't go wrong again. And I've become convinced that this is why large organizations are the way that they are. A lot of bureaucracy, hard to get stuff done. So when you feel that pressure, A, resist. If you can just don't do it, just don't do it. Or at the very least, fit the policy to how severe the problem is and how frequently it's going to occur. Now, there's exceptions to this. Security is obviously key. So, we have rules about your laptop needs to auto-lock. If you need to have user data on your local machine, it needs to be on an encrypted volume. But aside from those, when I sat down with my team in preparing this talk and said, what are some rules, what are some places where we've done a good job sort of matching the rule to the severity of the problem? The most common response I got was, I can't think of any rules we have. And that's what you want. Obviously, this is a creative process, ideally, and creativity thrives under sort of a minimal set of rules. Retrospectives and Kaizens. How many people do retrospectives regularly? Cool. Maybe about a third of the group. This is the key point to supporting the self-organizing team improving over time. This is the team. It's the team's meeting. It's a way for them to reflect on what's working for us, what do we want to do more of, what do we want to do less of. It's important to leave a retrospective with an action plan. So generally in our retrospectives, we identify 15, 20 things that we'd like to do more or less of. It's important to boil that down to 1 or 2, figure out what the action plan is on it. Is there somebody going to take point on it? What are you actually going to do with it, and leave and execute it in time for the next retro, and review that as well. Beer helps. retrospectives a lot, particularly if you're doing the retrospectives at the end of the day. You're less effective for morning retrospectives. If you want to learn how to do this well, talk to Ross. Ross facilitates our retrospectives on the team at WePlay, and he learned the art from Cyrus Innovation, who's a sponsor today, who I'm sure would be delighted to share their wisdom there with you as well. They call that Kaizen term comes in part from what Cyrus calls retrospectives. Kaizen is a Japanese term that means continuous improvement. So delegation. Delegation is interesting. Anyone know what delegation means? Basically, taking a task you're going to do yourself and hand it to somebody else. It's interesting because it can sort of be at odds with a self-organizing team. But you can play the balance pretty well, and here's how I try to think about it. Identify what are the discrete repetitive tasks that you're doing that you have to do regularly. Automate them so you don't have to do them. That's what we do naturally as software developers. There's a category of things that you just can't automate, and those share amongst the team. It's a way for people to grow. It's a way for people to feel some ownership and feel connection to various sort of problem areas on the team. So some examples: monitoring 500s on your web app, surfacing performance issues, calculating velocity. You might have somebody who's a point on technical support, past your first level of support if you've got that. Another great thing to delegate that helps people grow is vendor relationships. So as a manager, you'll be the natural person to talk to vendors, talk to your hosting provider, talk to other third-party services that you're using. Bring members of your team into those conversations. Let them get a feel for how that works. It's going to help free your time up. It's going to help them grow and prepare them for what might be their next role. And it's also going to share responsibility across the team. The next one comes out of lean manufacturing. And this is a metaphor, because in lean manufacturing, the andon cord is literally a cord that you can pull that stops the line in the auto factory. It's out of the Toyota production system. And why do you stop the line? You stop the line anytime you see any kind of problem, any kind of quality problem. Somebody's falling behind. There's a part that's, this batch of screws that you got is not threaded correctly. And the reason that this is a key part of the Toyota production system is because Toyota realized that if they just let the line continue, then it was going to be a lot more expensive to fix that problem once the cars were sitting there in the yard than it would be if they stopped everything and fixed it on the spot. Now, it might seem obvious the way I described it, but this is in a lot of contrast to the sort of conventional wisdom of factories, which is you never stop the line. How many parts you can get through that factory line, every hour is basically how much money you're making. So this is a little bit of reverse conventional wisdom, and you feel that pressure in a software development process too. And I'm going to give you an example of what we were going through at WePlay, where this became a factor. So we wanted to introduce sort of a new local aspect to the site. And we were sort of wrestling. It's clearly a big project. We're wrestling with, how do we get started? What's the first thing to do? And so we came up with the idea, well, a good way to start would be to start to catalog all the ball fields in the country: basketball courts, baseball fields, soccer fields, et cetera. And we started into this project, and we realized, wow, the data is incredibly segmented, hard to get at, and the members of the team started saying, hey, this doesn't feel like something we can be successful at. And my instinct initially as the manager was let's keep pushing through. Let's keep at it. Let's write some scrapers. We'll get better at this after we do a few of them. And the sort of metaphorical andon cord was pulled, by a couple of members of the team, and Lee in particular, standing up and saying, look, I really think we should reconsider this. And so we did. We reset, and we decided on another approach that was let us get to market a lot faster with it, and set us up to do that other project, building on top of a more solid foundation. Be patient. Some of you may be familiar with the sort of team formation model: forming, storming, norming, performing. You form a team, there's conflict gets shaked out, and you understand what the norms, what the sort of expectations are between people, and then you can evolve into a high-performing team once those are established. That storming process in particular can be a little scary to watch, but creativity is messy. Think about the most amazing artists who have graced the planet. Think about the musicians that you admire the most. Very few of them are buttoned up, always follow the rules types. So be patient with your team as it figures out its path to being creative and being high performing. One of the practices that has worked the best for me over the last 5-6 years is one-on-ones. And so let's start with the why of a one-on-one, and a real quick definition is it's a meeting between you and the person who works for you, one at a time, one-on-one. And the why is because we need some time to focus on individual growth. We talked earlier about why personal growth is important, particularly in the contrast of a self-organizing team. It's also important because everybody knows that they've got a pre-planned time that's coming up soon where they can address any questions or concerns that they've got privately with you. So one of the things that I notice is that people come to the one-on-ones with a couple of notes written down ahead of time, something that occurred to them a few days before, so that they write down. And what that lets them do is, it lets them take this sort of concern off their mind for the time being, focus on the work at hand, knowing that there's a time where this is going to get addressed. And lastly, because you care, and this is a time to check in personally, and that's frankly the very least that you can do for the people that you're responsible for managing. So how? 30 minutes once a week, each direct report. A rough breakdown, and it never goes quite like this, so you don't have to stick to it strong. 10 minutes on the questions your employee has, the concerns that they've got, ideas that they have that they felt maybe haven't been listened to. 10 minutes, your observations, stuff that they need to know about what's going on in the rest of the organization. Feedback, praise, concerns, and then the last 10 minutes, coaching for professional growth and development. What conferences are coming up that the person might want to attend? What is the next skill that they're trying to learn? What's the next technology they want to pick up? How are they going to do that? And again, coaching is really different from telling somebody what to do, right? Coaching is sort of in collaboration, helping them identify how they can grow, and then following up on it, asking how's it going with that. So again, I can't overestimate how key these are. Try it. Here's a way to get started. Identify the time slots. Send out a note to your team. Say, sign up for one of these. We're going to give this process a try. The time that I find works best for us is 30 minutes right before stand-up in the morning. So 3 or 4 days a week. I've got one of those at half an hour before stand-up. Lunchtime is okay too. Other parts of the day can interrupt the flow of the team and get a little rough. Hand in hand with this, and one-on-ones will help you naturally do this, but just pay attention to it. What motivates your employees? This is going to vary. This is my daughter, by the way, on the right. I couldn't come up with a good slide for motivation, so I figured a cute picture was second best. Understand what motivates your employees. It's going to be different for other people, but here's a key one to look for Rubyists. Mastery. And what mastery means is basically getting really, really good at your craft. This is pretty much an endless, lifelong pursuit for most of us. I set a goal, literally wrote down a goal like 10 years ago, that I wanted to be a world-class software developer. Still not there, but getting better every year. If you can support your folks in that quest, it means a lot and will help their relationship with the job, the team, the company, and with you considerably. Other things that motivate people, frankly, by the way, money, prestige, respect of their peers. Most of these are common sense, but just get inside. You probably, you could try asking somebody what motivates you, but that's probably not the best route at it. You sort of want to observe, listen, and watch how they make decisions. Feedback is a key, and it's a hard thing that I've noticed for myself and also for other developers who step into a technical role, particularly critical feedback. But it's really important because just like in software where you want to be able to catch a bug right away because it's a lot easier to solve then than if you're looking at it 6 months down the line. The same thing in being being an effective member of a team. You want to address that right away so that the experience is fresh in the person's mind and that they can address it. And critical feedback is probably the most uncomfortable to give, but again, really important to help people understand the impact of their actions and give them a chance to change it. So I'll give you a quick example of how you might deliver some feedback like this. Take the person in private, say, hey, Noah, can I talk to you for a minute? And he says, sure. You say, no, are you open to some feedback? And he'll say, sure. When you're having a design conversation with Ross and you cut him off in the middle of when he's trying to express an idea, as a team, we don't get the best ideas out on the table. And it's also uncomfortable for everybody because it's essentially it's disrespecting him. And typically, that's all you have to say. You don't have to solve the problem for the person. But sometimes they'll offer you a solution right there. Sometimes they'll think about it. Sometimes they'll push back, and there's a good conversation to be had there generally. But again, a good resource on this is the book, The 1 Minute Manager. This is a key process, a key technique, and something, again, that can be hard for us and not come naturally. Open source, on the other hand, I think comes pretty naturally. Anybody know any Rails projects or Ruby projects that don't use open source? That's a trick question. So make sure you're sharing your changes upstream and use open source to help your employees build their reputations, their prestige. This can tie into motivation we talked about before. This can tie into making it easier for you to hire because everybody wants to work with a great developer. And one of the certainly the measures of how good somebody is from outside of a company is what are the open source projects coming out of that person, coming out of that team. A great technique for making it easier for your team to commit patches back upstream is using Git submodules. You create a user, I think I learned this from Josh, wherever he is. You create a sort of account for your team in GitHub, so our account is WePlay. Give everybody, as you fork a project as that user, give everybody in the team commit rights. Have the project be a submodule in your main repo, and this works even if the submodule is a public repository on GitHub and your main project is a private repository. And then what you can do is simply make changes inside of that project, push them up to your fork, commit the change for the submodule, and your golden, smooth process for your own application, but you've also now got a public change that you can make a pull request, have a conversation about on a mailing list, et cetera. So hiring is a tough one, and here's how we do it. I take the lead in screening each candidate individually. Generally, I like to have that be an in-person meeting for somebody whose credentials look good. Sometimes I do it by phone if I have to. I try to avoid it. Every candidate matters. From my perspective, I want every candidate to leave with a great feeling about my company, about my team. Because this is a small world. Think about how many people that you know in this room, and if you were considering a job, would you say, hey, what do you know about this company? And if you're somebody, if that person interviewed with you and you basically just sort of cut them off and said, all right, not going to work, that's probably not going to be a great conversation. The next process, if somebody makes it over that hurdle, is a group interview. And just a quick word about what that threshold is. Basically, from my perspective, it should be if you don't have a team, you would hire that person right now. So you're not bringing people into group interviews that you're thinking, probably a pretty good candidate. You're bringing people into a group interview that says, where you're thinking, I think this person is the next member of our team. Let me make sure. I've done group interviews both as the entire team and in two sections with sort of half the team and the other half of the team. Both of them have worked fine. Usually I'll look at some code in the first pass, but the group reviews always include code review and/or screening. Immediately after the group interview, I ask people not to discuss the candidate with each other, and I ask them to email me a hire or no hire recommendation, and a couple sentences about why. Once I have all of those in, then we have a conversation as a group. I'll sort of share the results, and a conversation ensues. If we have all hires, then that's pretty good, but it's still not quite enough. Usually what I'll ask for is somebody here, somebody in the team willing to champion this person? If there's nobody willing to champion the person, that's a warning sign. So I also am clear, it's not a democratic process. This is not hiring entirely by committee. But the reality is that I've never brought a member onto the team where I didn't have 100% buy-in from the existing team. And I think that from going back to the forming, storming, norming, performing concept, that makes that process a lot easier if everybody sort of feels ownership of this decision and really wants this person to succeed. As far as where to find people, which is probably the toughest question, you're in the right place today. So that's step one. 14, one more left after this. The us-them relationship. This is killer. I've seen it in almost every organization I've been a part of, and the reason for that is because human beings define themselves sort of tribally. We define ourselves as the group that we're a part of, and then the other group. You can see that in the opening of this talk. We talked about the Microsoft community, the Java community, and most of us probably here feel proud that we're part of the Ruby community. We define ourselves in terms of what we're not. So this can be good and bad. I think in terms of being proud of being in the Ruby community, that's great. But if you're talking about an us-them relationship between yourself, your team, and the operations team, or your team and the back-end team, that can be totally destructive and dysfunctional to an organization. So as a manager, you want to figure out how to break that down. The best way is to have cross-functional teams. At the very least, try to get those teams to sit together, spend time together, work on projects together. But there's a flip side to this that can work really well, which is you can actually purposefully cultivate an us-them relationship outside of your company. And so the way that looks is you're going out and finding stories about teams to bring back to your team. So let's say your team feels like it's not moving fast enough. It just feels like, we're kind of slow. And you need a little bit of a lift in morale. Bring back a story about a team that took 2 months before they wrote their first line of code. There are tons of them out there. On the flip side, let's say your team thinks that, man, we are hot stuff. We've got this deploy process that is just smooth as silk. And so you go out and bring that back to the story of IMVU, right, which does graceful rolling deploys where they roll out to a cluster, a portion of their cluster, measure business metrics, infrastructure metrics, all driven off of CI that runs across like 60 distributed machines. They probably won't think that they're so great and have nothing to learn at that point. And lastly, be honest. If you lie to your team, you destroy everything that these first points, the first 14 points have been building up. Now, maybe that sounds easy. It's actually really hard, unfortunately, in many organizations. As a manager, you'll find yourself caught in the middle of a lot of conversations. Caught in the middle of a business person that's got questions about how well your team is executing, with a tech team that questions the decisions that the rest of the business is making. So you got to do your best, be honest about your concerns, but also the flip side of this is be honest about your passion. Hopefully you're working on a project and for a company that you believe in what you're doing. Share that with your team. Share your passion for the mission. And that goes a long way to making people excited about coming in every day. A couple of resources. In general, I said it at the beginning, but I'll mention it again. This is a craft unto itself. There's lessons to be taken from software development, but you're really going to have to learn a bunch of new stuff as well. And it becomes a new lifelong pursuit if it's something that you choose to embrace. And by the way, feel free to not embrace it. If it's not for you, be part of a great team. That's awesome. I put together a reading list at bit.ly/GORUCO books. If people have ideas for stuff I should add to that, happy to. Some great podcasts that I've learned a ton from, Manager Tools, the Agile Executive and the Agile Toolkit podcasts have all taught me a lot. And then this one's kind of funny, but I did a lot of acting, improv stuff growing up and in college. And as a manager, you have to think on your feet a lot. I found that it has really come in handy. So think about it. It might even be a fun thing to do together with your team. The end of the talk's not the end of the talk. I look forward to continuing this conversation over lunch later today at the party tonight. Please ask me questions. Tell me what's working for you if you're a manager or if you're on a team that you think is doing really great, and challenge me. Clearly, as mentioned, there's more than one way to go about all this stuff, and I'm always looking for new ideas. So with that, thank you, GORUCO, and thank you in particular to my team at WePlay, past, present, and future. It's really been a lot of fun evolving these ideas together. Time for questions? Yeah, so the question was, to summarize it, is there a place for introducing artificial constraints that could actually encourage creativity? So to be clear, what I think is that creativity flourishes in a place with minimal constraints, not with no constraints and no rules. And I do think that stuff's great, particularly if it comes from the team and comes out of the retrospective process. If it's something that's imposed and without the sort of input and sort of excitement from the team, then probably not going to be that effective. If it's something that is sort of identified as a problem and as that's part of that team self-organization process, then absolutely a great idea. So the question was, is the reason that acting and improv is useful so that you can put on a happy face when things are going terribly? No, I'm generally have a pretty positive outlook in general, but the reason that I think acting and improv is really useful is not to deceive your team. In fact, I think that would destroy the trust, but because you got to think on your feet a lot. You end up on the spot in a lot of situations, both from the rest of your management team as well as from your team. And if you don't have experience being able to work out ideas on the spot like that, it can be a pretty awkward experience. So the question is, do you apply yes and along with pair programming? Quick summary for the mic. Yes and is an improv technique where you not allowed to disagree with the other person that you're improving with. So you always have to sort of agree and then add another idea to it. And the question is, can we apply that with pair programming? Sounds like a lot of fun. The question was twofold. First part is, what if somebody that you're coaching wants to grow in a way that, in an area that has nothing to do with your business or your current technology stack? And then the second part is, do you time box sort of similar to like Google's 20% time, maybe as an example, of sort of like learning time? The first part, I would encourage the person to explore it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they do it during the day when the team's working on a project. But certainly I'm not going to suggest to somebody that they don't learn something that they're interested in. And in fact, I'll often say, well, why don't you prepare, why don't you do some research, learn some stuff, and do a quick brown bag for the team at lunch in 2 weeks, something like that if they want to bring in some information. And then to the sort of structured learning time, we've talked about it some, experimented with a little bit. We don't do it. Don't know, maybe we should. It's certainly hard in a startup as well. The question is, where does the evolution to mastery fit in if there's no sort of structured learning? And one of the places where we work to fit that in is in having developers take on the projects that they're particularly passionate about. And so, like in most agile practices, we've sort of got a backlog of features that we've got ideas about. One of the things that we do differently from like a strict Scrum process is it's not a rigidly defined priority system. It's all stuff that we generally think is a pretty good idea. And so we'll let people take on and champion the ideas that they feel passionate about and that's going to take them down perhaps a path that they want to learn more about. Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. Like I said, let's continue the conversation.